going to install the 2-column car lift. This is the 4-ton model. When you receive the package, it's going to come in different parts. You have the big unit over here, which are the 2 columns. And they are mounted together or held together with a rig on either side. Inside the pillars, you will find a lot of other parts like the safety protection. You will find also the arms for the bridge. There we go. And then we've got the steel cable. And inside the smaller box you will find first of all the instruction manual. That's very important. Have a look in that because it lists all the parts that you should have with this lift. You also have a bag with nuts and bolts to put everything together. You got the mechanical anchors. You got 10 of them. We also got some sensors. We've got some covers, the hoses. We got electromagnetic relays, which will disengage the lift when it needs to descend. And you have, of course, the adjustable foot that you can put on the arms so you can actually adjust the height of it. In the other car box, you will find the motor unit, which is the hydraulic pump and the reservoir. And then finally, you will find the cover panel that goes on the floor. And the control box is also inside one of the pillars, but I can't get it out right now because the top column is in the way. And here you have the hydraulic motor, and the hydraulic pump and the reservoir. If you order up the bridge, make sure that you specify the motor for the right voltage. So if you have 220 volts, monophase, specify it. If you're planning to install the lift yourself, then be aware that the weight is quite heavy. This is 600 kilograms, so there is no way you can lift this on your own. You might need a couple of people, but in essence you should have some lifting equipment. So I'm going to lift the top pillar off and disconnect it from its fixture. So remember, you need to support the column once you are removing the bolts that are holding the column into place onto the fixture. You might jiggle a bit up and down with your forklift or whatever tool you have so that the bolts come out very easily. So now it's time to lift it all up. And to remove the fixture from the bottom pillar we do exactly the same, but now I'm going to use a pallet lift to lift up the bottom column so I can undo the bolts on the fixture. And now we can unbolt the bottom part. Pull out the bottom pillar. So we removed the brackets from the 2 columns and now we need to install the first column. And the first one to be installed is the one where the motor, the hydraulic motor, is going to be mounted on. And that's the one where you find inside these cables. You'll find a hydraulic hose and you find some other cables here. That's the one we need to install first, so it is this one. So before we install the first column, we have to find the right spot where we want to have it on the work floor. Now keep in mind that you have to make sure that the ceiling is high enough. Make sure that you have enough space around the lift. And the most important part is the floor. You must have a level, solid, hard concrete floor with a thickness between 15 to 20 centimeters. That is very important because the foot of the pillar or the column will sit on the concrete and you need to bolt it down with anchors, and these anchors are provided. If these foot are not very well held in place, the column can collapse. You don't want to be under the car, or you don't want to have your best car dropping down because your pillar is collapsing. Keep also in mind that the pillars must be straight up, vertical, and in all directions. Consider a good and solid bonding of the foot to the ground, to the concrete floor. If your concrete slab isn't thick enough, don't take risks. Then dig a hole and pour some concrete. In the package you will find 10 mechanical M18 locking bolts. So you need to drill the hole of the sufficient depth and then knock them in on the top, and then this part will then slide in and it will expand. I'm not going to use this because this is causing some stress on the concrete. I'm going to use a chemical bond, which I think is a bit better. Instead of using mechanical bonding methods like these bolts, I'm going to use chemical bonding, and this is a two-component product that will actually glue in the bolts into the concrete. So now that we have to drill the holes in the concrete, I want to make sure that I have them in the right spot. And I'm going to use a template for that one. I'm using an old piece of plywood, nothing special. And I'm just going to put it along the edge there, and then I'm going to mark it with a pen, and then I know exactly where everything is. We already drilled the holes in it, and we made sure they're aligned with the foot of the column. And now I'm just going to paint it with black. So first I will pre-drill the hole with a smaller bit. The depth is nearly 20 centimeters anyway, so we are good. The holes that we just drilled were 20 millimeters. They are 2 millimeters bigger than the actual threaded bar that we're going to put in. And now we need to make sure that all the dust goes out. That's very important. So we need to clean all this up very nicely. And you need to do this about 3 times. So now I'm going to cut some threaded rods out of this bar at 18 centimeters to put them in the holes that we just made. And here's the first bar. We cut all the threaded rods and see if they fit. And that looks quite all right. And notice I always keep the template in place, because that's the way I'm going to make sure that everything is going to fit. There we go. So that looks quite good. The reason that I did cut the bars at an angle of 10 degrees is it makes it so much easier to put the nut on later. I'm using a pulley to lift up the first column. Going to turn it the way she has to be. We've lowered the pillar, and now we can tighten them down to the ground. But don't tighten it all the way, because you may have to adjust the level of the pillar. So we're going to need a big washer, and then we're going to need a big locking ring, and then the nuts. So we're going to lock it down a little bit in the beginning, but not too much, so the pillar doesn't fall over. But I'm not going to lock it down all the way, because I still may have to adjust the pillar. It's of extreme importance that the pillars are absolutely upright. So you will need a level meter to do that, and then measure the level. If the pillar is not level whatsoever, then you may have to use a couple of shims underneath the base plate of the pillar before you tighten down the nuts and bolts. Now that we have installed the first pillar and secured it to the ground, now we can install the second pillar. I already have it more or less in place, but to find its final position, because you need to have the right distance between the 2 pillars, I'm using this metal ground shield that comes with the 2-column lift. And I slide it underneath the first pillar that we already bolted down to the ground. Now all I need to do is move in this pillar into this gap here, and then just bolt it down. I'm not going to bolt this one down with a template. That was one example. I'm going to bolt it down straight through the holes. These are 2 different methods, and it's up to you which one you prefer, but I just wanted to show you the 2. Just make sure that you don't catch the cables in between the metal, because that wouldn't be all that good, would it? So let's see if we can move this in now. I think this is about it. Measure the distance between the 2 columns and make sure that it's the same both on the top and at the bottom, and check it with your building plan. Now we're going to drill the holes for the chemical anchors, and I'm going to do it with the pillar in place. And the next thing we're going to install are the electromagnetic plungers. And these are the plungers. There's 4 of them, 2 on each column. And those are a safety device, and that's why this lift has a CE certificate. Other lifts that I've seen similar to this one don't have that. The mechanism is as follows. You've got a blocking mechanism, and you've got to make sure when you fit it in that it's fitted in with the cutouts facing the inside where the car is actually. So that's going to go through there like this, and then that will be sitting on a support at the inside. So when the lift goes up, it's going to toggle and block. And when the lift has to go down, the electromagnetic will pull back, and then this whole system will be pulled back, and then the lift can descend. So you're going to need this metal piece, and make sure when you mount it that you mount it with the cutout piece towards the side of the car. This electromagnetic has to be mounted on the back side of the pillars or the columns, and you're going to need to do it with 4 short Phillips screws. Now, use the short ones, not the long ones, so they shouldn't be sticking out inside the pillar. And then you will need an additional element, which is kind of a little clamp, which is this clamp here, which will hold this locking plate in place, and that you need to fit in like so. So that's going to go in, very simple, in the cutout again, like so, and hold it. And again, it's going to be fixed through the back of the column. This is very important because that's the safety latch. That is also why this lift is CE certified, because other lifts don't have that mechanism. So this is an electrical locking mechanism. Just above the piston you will find the first locking position, and there's another one higher up. So we're going to fit the first electromagnet. It's going to go through the back, and then look at this panel, how this is supposed to be. Slide it on like this, very important. See? So whenever the magnet is engaged, they will pull back that. See? Installing the electromagnetic plunger is very easy. Just make sure that you have these wires coming out of the unit facing towards the bigger cable that you have here, because that's going back to your control unit. Then get some of those short Phillips screws and put them in. Make sure that you use the short ones, because otherwise it's going to stick through the inside. Now check that the plunger has free play. The next step is to mount this metal bracket. This is the locking panel that will lock the lift, and make sure that the cutout is facing this side. Just put it over the plunger and hold it like this. That's all you need to do. Now, to hold that in place and to secure it, you're going to need this little piece. So let me place it there. That's a little bit of fiddling. And if you're with 2, this is so much easier. Working alone is always a little bit more difficult, but this will work. There we go. So I'm using a longer Phillips screw in the back, and I'm locking it in. And I'm going to use a second screwdriver to keep that a bit straight while I'm tightening the Phillips screw in the back. There we go. So now this whole mechanism is safely in place. Nothing can happen with it. And make sure that this mechanism works. Check it out. Because this is your safety. This is the catch that will catch the lift. So now it's time to fit the steel cables. And before we can do that, we'll have to lift up to its first locking mechanism on both sides. And that is why we fitted the electromagnetic plungers first. Otherwise, you can't lock the lift. If this is a bit heavy, and if you're with 2 people, it's easier, but you need to lift it up until you hear the first click. There we go. Did you hear that click? That's the first position. So I'm going to do this on the other side as well, and then we can start running the cables. Now for the cable run, have a close look on your instruction manual. It's clearly explained, but I'll show it as well, and if it isn't clear enough, have another check on your instruction manual. And here is the steel cable. We got 2 steel cables, and we will have to install them on the shuttle from the left to the right. And the whole purpose of the steel cable is to run the shuttles in sync. So they should go up at the same page, they should come down at the same page, and there should be no difference. That's why you need to lock it in its first position on both the left and the right column, and then run the cables. Once we have run the cables, we'll then do the cable tensioning adjustment, and then finally we'll have to grease the cable, because you've got to grease the cable. That's very important. You're not greased right now because it would make too much of a mess, but once you're done, you've got to grease it. The shuttle glides inside the column on nylon blocks, and you can see the white block all the way in the back there. And it's good practice before installing the cables to grease the sliding area of those nylon blocks. And first of all, we're going to clean it with a cloth, and then we grease it. Now I am using white lithium grease, but you can use any type of grease you want. So first I'm going to connect the cable, which is going to go up to the shuttle of the column that is holding the motor. And guys, this is a little bit of fiddling to get all this in, but it will work. And I'm going to leave it all the way extended for now. And I'm not going to tighten it down. So now I'm going to run up the cable all the way to the top pulley. And the cable, which is now coming down, routed through the shuttle. At the bottom of the column, route the cable from the back of the pulley to the front. And then pull the cable to the other pillar. Take it to the back of the pulley and route it inside the shuttle. Pull out the cable and try to feed it through the hole in the back of the shuttle. There we go. And a nut. A nut in the bottom, a washer, and a nut. And that way we can then adjust the cable tension later on. But right now, that's not what we're going to do. First of all, we now will install the second cable. So for the second cable, we're going to do exactly the same. We'll hook it up to the shuttle, to the outer part. The cable goes up over the top pulley, back down through the shuttle to the other side, and then back up to the shuttle on the other side. Just like we've done on this one, but it's just the opposite direction. Once both cables are in place, we need to tighten them up. For me, the easiest way is to use kind of a lever and then tighten the nut. Adjust the tension on the cables by adjusting the nuts here, by either putting it further down or more up, and make sure that both cables have the same tension. And then just pull on the cable and check the tension, and that feels about right. The next thing we're going to do is to install the hydraulic hose between the two pillars. And make sure that you get no dust or dirt inside these connectors, because that wouldn't be very good. Remove the protective cap. And normally you would have a protective cap on this side, but I already pulled it off and I lost it, unfortunately. So I put some plastic on it. Right, make sure it's clean and try to hook it up. You may turn this piston a little bit. Tighten it down well, but not over tighten it, because you don't want to have an oil leak. And now run the cable to the other side, where we do exactly the same. So the next thing is to install the motor, and what I have done is pre-install the bolts already on the pillar, so I can just hook it on to it. It's up to you how you want to do that, but I'm on my own, so I have to make things a bit easier for myself. One other thing you will see on this motor is that there is already a short power cable coming out of it. Now obviously we'll have to change that, but that's what we're going to discuss and look at while we're doing the electrical installation of this bridge, together with all the electromagnets and all the safety measures and the control box. So for now, don't worry about this. I pre-positioned the bolts in the bracket, so that makes it easy to hang the unit on it. Otherwise, you have to hold it and try to put the bolt through, and that's very hard to do. So now I just need to tighten it up, and we're all set. The next step is to feed the hydraulic hose for the motor and the cables through that hole. Now that hole typically does not have a grommet in it, so you have grommets, and this is a grommet, with the kit, and you have to put it in before you put the cables through, so that way you don't damage the cables. So it's probably best first to feed the hydraulic cable. See now guys, that's why I have not greased the cables yet, because otherwise you would be all greasy. And let's feed the control cables for the motor. There's one cable for the electromagnet on the motor, the relief valve, and one to drive the motor. Now we're going to install the lifting arms, and we have 2 short ones and 2 long ones. So they always need to be installed in pairs, a short one and a long one per column. Installing a lift arm is easy. On the shuttles you need to remove the circlip, and this is a circlip from the bottom of this rod, and then you can actually pull out this rod like so. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to grease a little bit the area where I will have friction. And a little bit in the hole. So this is a short arm, and they are pretty heavy, so you might need some help while you're trying to put this in. And if you install the arm, make sure that there are no bolts on this side. All the bolts should be on this side. That's where you have the black bolts. That's where you should connect the protection shield. With the arm in place, then install the protection shield, so you can't put your feet under there. This is a safety feature. You don't have to, but it's recommended that you do, and just bolt it down. If you need to swing the arm in and out, pull on this ring. That unlocks it, and then you can actually turn it, and then let go again to have it back in place. And don't forget to put the circlip at the bottom of the rod. This is the pad that needs to be installed at the end of the arm lift, and it goes inside this hole, and you will see that there's a metal block here and a bit of a cutout here. So make sure that it fits in the right way, like so. So the bottom part can turn. And like anything else, I will grease this up a bit. So put it in, make sure it locks, and then turn it all the way in, and then install the circlip in this groove.